Hey everyone, I honestly never thought I'd be posting here. But I guess none of us do until something inside us finally snaps. My husband, Ethan 34M, and I 32F have been together for almost a decade, married for 6 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, hit it off instantly and built a life that, to everyone on the outside, looked like something out of a cozy Instagram feed. There were Sunday lakeside walks, lazy movie nights with too much popcorn, and his sweet little tradition of bringing me fresh flowers every Friday after work. I used to think that kind of consistency meant security. For years, Ethan prided himself on being predictable, and I loved him for it. But a few months ago, tiny cracks started forming in that steady rhythm. It started when he suddenly decided to enroll in a downtown photography class. He said it was to decompress after stressful weeks, but Ethan had never been an artsy guy. His hobbies were golf, fantasy football and binge-watching crime shows. Not framing the perfect shot in a darkroom. At first, I brushed it off as harmless. I even encouraged him, thinking maybe it was healthy for him to explore something new. But then he became oddly protective of his schedule. He'd leave for class early, come home late, and his stories about the lessons felt rehearsed, like he was reading from a script. Sometimes he'd mention classmates but only in vague terms, a few people, just a mixed group. Never names, never details. The biggest red flag came when he started guarding his phone. Ethan used to leave it lying around face up without a care. Suddenly it was glued to him. He'd take it into the shower, keep it on silent during dinner, even flip it face down whenever I walked by. When I teased him about his spy-level secrecy, he laughed it off and claimed he was part of a surprise gift group chat for me. Sweet, right? Except there was no gift. And his explanations always had just a hint too much charm to feel genuine. He also began dressing differently, switching out his usual polo shirts for fitted button-downs, styling his hair before class, even splurging on cologne that didn't smell like anything he'd ever worn for me. I'd ask where the sudden interest in grooming came from, and he'd roll his eyes and joke about keeping up with the cool kids. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to the man who once couldn't wait to tell me about every boring detail of his commute or share dumb memes with me while brushing our teeth. But the unease in my stomach kept growing louder. A quiet voice telling me that Ethan wasn't just taking pictures in that studio downtown. He was rewriting parts of our story, and I wasn't sure I was even in the frame anymore. I wish I could say I uncovered everything in one clean moment, but the truth is it happened in fragments. Like someone tipping a puzzle box over and forcing me to put the picture together one jagged piece at a time. The first piece was a crumpled receipt I found in the pocket of his jacket while doing laundry. It was from a tiny cafe near the old railway yard. A place I'd never even heard of. 2 cappuccinos, 1 slice of red velvet cake, and a note scrawled at the bottom. See you next week, L. My stomach lurched, but I told myself it could have been a meeting or a client lunch. Ethan works in logistics, coffee meetings are normal, right? Still, I slid the receipt into a drawer instead of throwing it away. Then came the Instagram post. I don't even follow many photographers, but one of my friends tagged me in a photo from a pop-up art market downtown. In the background, barely visible, was Ethan, laughing with a woman whose hand rested lightly on his forearm. She was holding a camera, her dark hair piled messily on top of her head, ink smudges on her fingers. I couldn't unsee it after that. Every late night, every team dinner, every muted phone call felt heavier. And then one rainy Tuesday the rail bomb dropped. A photograph lying on our hall table, tucked under his car keys. It was a stunning black and white portrait of a woman holding an umbrella. Her gaze was direct, playful, alive. Even without a signature, I knew it was his work. Ethan doesn't frame my pictures that carefully. I picked it up, tracing the edges. That's when I saw faint handwriting on the back. For E, thanks for showing me how to find the light. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped it. The tenderness in that photo wasn't something you fake for a class project. That was intimacy captured on film. That night, Ethan came home late again, smelling faintly of wine and something soft and floral, not my perfume. He tossed me a distracted smile, said traffic had been a nightmare, and headed straight for the shower without noticing the portrait was gone from the table. Standing there, staring at the damp umbrella in the picture, I realized the man I married wasn't just lying in tiny increments anymore. He'd built a whole other life, and I was just beginning to see the outlines of it. By the time I finally decided to confront Ethan, I'd spent 3 nights staring at that photo under the lamplight, my mind circling the same questions until they tangled into knots. I rehearsed 100 calm openings, but the second he walked in the door, something inside me snapped. He was humming, actually humming, as he set down a paper bag that smelled suspiciously like takeout from our favorite Thai place. The same man who'd claimed he was too tired to go out with me last week suddenly had energy to play delivery boy. I held up the photograph. Care to explain this? For a moment he froze, eyes flicking from me to the picture like a trapped animal. Then came the first excuse, smooth as butter. Oh, that? She's just my instructor. We were experimenting with portraits after class. I asked why there was a note on the back. His next explanation was clumsier. She writes those for everyone. Motivation, you know? Artists. When I mentioned the cafe receipt, his jaw tightened. He claimed it was a networking hangout. Apparently, logistics managers and art teachers gather over cake now? And when I brought up the photo of him at the market, he rolled his eyes and accused me of being paranoid. The more I pressed, the worse his lies became. He insisted they'd only gone out for drinks once or twice, swore nothing physical had happened, then moments later admitted to a brief kiss, only to backtrack again. His story changed so many times I couldn't keep up. They were friends, then mentors, then colleagues on a community project. Finally, I told him I'd had enough. I asked point-blank if he was having an affair with Lila. There was a long silence, heavy enough to make my ears ring. Then he sighed like I was inconveniencing him and muttered, "Okay, we got a little too close. But it's not serious. You're blowing this out of proportion." That sentence, "a little too close," hit harder than any confession. He wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was annoyed he'd been caught. I remember standing there, shaking, feeling like our entire marriage had been set on fire in the space of 10 minutes. He tried to reach for me, to give me some half-hearted reassurance, but I stepped back. For the first time in years, I saw Ethan clearly. Not the man who once brought me Friday flowers, but someone selfish enough to gamble everything for a secret thrill. After that night, everything felt off. The house that once felt warm and familiar suddenly echoed with a kind of emptiness I couldn't put words to. Even the walls seemed to watch me, waiting for me to decide what to do with the mess Ethan had dumped at my feet. The first few days I barely slept. I'd lie awake replaying every conversation, every team dinner, every Friday bouquet, wondering how many of them were real and how many were props in his little theater. I felt foolish for all the times I'd trusted his smile, for ignoring the warning bells because I didn't want to seem jealous or dramatic. Anger came in bursts. I'd be folding laundry or brushing my teeth, and suddenly my hands would shake with fury at how casually he tried to gaslight me. I even found myself yelling at the photograph one night, not at Lila, but at the way Ethan's tenderness had been captured there. A softness he hadn't shown me in months. But beneath the anger sat this heavy, quiet grief. It wasn't just about a kiss or a cafe receipt. It was the death of the story I thought we were writing together. The Ethan I'd loved, the one who made late-night pancakes and sang off-key in the car, felt like a ghost wearing my husband's face. I tried talking to him again, hoping maybe he'd wake up and fight for us, but every conversation turned into him minimizing or shifting blame. He'd say things like, "I just needed space," or, "You've been so focused on work lately I felt lonely," as if my career or our routines somehow signed a permission slip for betrayal. I started leaning on friends I hadn't reached out to in years, people who reminded me I wasn't crazy or overreacting. One of them suggested therapy, and for the first time I sat across from someone who helped me put names to what I was feeling: betrayal, trauma, loss of safety, mourning a version of love that no longer existed. It was only then, sitting in that small office with tissues piling up on my lap, that I began to understand. His choices weren't about my worth. They were about his inability to value what he already had. That realization hurt, but it also planted the first fragile seed of clarity. By the end of that third week, I was exhausted from living in limbo. Ethan kept oscillating between grand gestures, flowers, fancy dinners, promises that he'd cut things off with Lila, and passive-aggressive sighs whenever I asked for transparency. He even suggested we take a break so we can miss each other, as if our marriage were a Netflix show we could pause and resume at will. I realized then that he wasn't fighting for us. He was fighting to keep his comfort intact. He didn't want to lose his safety net at home, but he also wasn't willing to give up the thrill of sneaking around. That hurt worse than the affair itself. One night after a therapy session, I sat at our kitchen table with a notebook. I listed everything I tried. Talking, asking for honesty, suggesting counseling. Underneath, I wrote the one thing I hadn't done: choose myself. So I called a locksmith, changed the code on the garage, and packed a bag for a weekend away at my sister's. When I left, Ethan barely looked up from his phone. That told me everything. A month later, I filed for separation. He sent a few angry texts, then some tearful ones, but none of them contained the thing I needed most: real accountability. Now, standing on the other side of the chaos, I feel lighter. Not because the betrayal didn't scar me, but because I finally stopped carrying the weight of someone else's lies. I've learned that predictability isn't the same as loyalty, and that love without respect is just a comfortable trap. If anyone reading this senses that quiet, persistent tug in their gut, don't ignore it. You're not paranoid or too sensitive. You're hearing yourself asking for truth. Trust that voice. It's trying to lead you back to your own life.